Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're good. It's a Thursday, but because it's Good Friday tomorrow, it feels like a Friday. Let's be honest. We've all got that Friday feeling. And so we always have a special show on a Friday. And so our special show is on a Thursday today. I've been really looking forward to this one. I was approached on LinkedIn, which is where this show also casts. So if you haven't noticed this before, we go out on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, LinkedIn, Instagram. And on LinkedIn, a lady called Ashree Singh. We had a back and forth on direct message there, a little bit about the work she's been doing. She's an FCP physio, lead FCP physio at Primary Care Physio, and so she's doing some great work on trying to counter some of the vaccine hesitancy in the BAME community. So I really wanted to discuss that because it's kind of come up in other shows before, but it deserves a show of its own. And so perfect guests to be the expert in the room to help me and you through understanding that issue, and also, no doubt, what we can all do to contribute positively to her work and to improving sort of evidence-informed narratives on important topics such as this at such an interesting and strange time. So I'm really appreciative of her time today, and hopefully, if the technology behaves itself, I can bring her in the click of a couple of buttons. Please, as ever, just get yourself join in the chat. Make sure you let us know. As ever, I've got my tech gremlins. I'm always concerned about whether you can hear us okay and stuff. So you've got to let us know on the chat. Otherwise, me and Ashree are just going to get stuck into this topic and we won't know. So you've got to let us know. But also, please do get stuck into this and let us know any questions you have. I'd hate for it to be that the last couple of minutes, that's when you pipe up with all your questions and we don't have time. So please do join the conversation and chew this over together with us because it's really important. So hopefully, without further ado, Ashree, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, that's nicely then. So, tell us a little bit about yourself for those that don't know of you and your work, if we can start there.
Sure. So first of all, thank you so much for having me here. I'm a great fan of this show because it's in lunch hour and it gives you so much information in just that half an hour. So thank you. Delighted to be here. So regarding myself, I'm a lead first contact physiotherapist in Primary Care Physio. I've been working as an FCP and I've got now a special interest in COVID, long COVID, and obviously vaccine hesitancy. I think it all started when I caught COVID myself in December, supposedly with a new variant. And then I've been doing a vaccine clinic as well. I've been vaccinating from last 4 months. So as a physiotherapist, I know probably, yes, we've probably contributed a lot since the COVID time because we've involved in vaccination, in ICU care, etc. So I think it's so important at this stage, unlike the other, pandemic that we had in the past or any sort of virus, thing that makes this different is the amount of people that have been affected. So it's very important, being a physiotherapist or being any healthcare professional, we are kind of not burdened. And I feel we carry an extra responsibility to know the things better so that we can disseminate the information in the society.
No, for sure. Yeah, I think that's something that we've kind of seen everyone step up and want to understand the detail so that they can be a trusted advisor, because often that's where people do lean on us as professionals to sort of offer their take on the matter. And so being informed is only important. Is only the least we can do, really, is to make sure that we're not ignorant to some of these important issues. You had COVID yourself. How did you get on with that, both in terms of your symptoms and then is there any hangover, for want of a better term of it, any long enduring features?
I think I'm glad I had the COVID because otherwise, I mean, we all know our own, we're all good at our own work. I might be really good with MSK, but that's what my personal opinion would be. With this scenario, I think it's a responsibility of every single healthcare professional to know more and more about COVID-19 and about long COVID. And that's what I did when I suffered from COVID. I work probably Monday to Saturday. I never had that kind of day off. So I was sick. I was in bed. It was a terrible experience in terms of mental health because I thought whether I'll be ever able to get back to work because of this. So I started reading a lot about this COVID-19 or the vaccine, etc. And then I realized how much ever things are there. Actually, we are not aware. And I mean, simple things like I have seen in those timings when I was suffering from COVID, I was told my some of my staff saying, "Oh, you had COVID. Oh my God, you know what? Up until now, I didn't even believe it existed. Now, since you have, because they trusted me, I believe, okay, this is something actually does
Right.
exist." So for me, I think COVID-19 was a positive experience in terms of I was and that was a time when I started making a lots of videos. I have made videos with some GPs. I've made videos of my own experience. I've made a Facebook page called Infodemics, Vaccine Against Infodemics, the term which was coined by WHO. And that's what was picked up by BBC and highlighted. So yeah, for me, overall, it was a positive experience of realizing, the in depth of the problem, and most importantly, providing the right information to the public. Because when I was suffering myself and I was making live videos and expressing my experience or my concern about it, people, at least in my circle, they tend to believe it more.
Right. Yeah, I think that's sometimes it. You're confronted with that personal experience that just sharpens the sense of what people are going through, but also trying to then recognize when you were in that moment, what are the resources that would have helped to reassure you? What are the resources that would then you would want others to have access to? And fair play, you've been one of those people that stepped up to that plate ever since. What's because the title of the talk, as well as what we wanted to discuss in detail today, is the vaccine hesitancy that you've then been trying to I won't say counteract, but offering support almost to some of those things, and trying to
Yeah,
help understand the narratives as well as then offering
yeah,
a reassurance. So tell us a little bit
yeah.
how you got into that line of work.
Yeah, so uh, we were so lucky as a country, especially in the UK, where the vaccination started on 8th of December, and it's a boon that we had the vaccine. But on the downside, it was very frustrating as a healthcare professional suffered from COVID, that there are still people who either did not believe in virus or the vaccine. Now, when we say anti-vaccinators or vaccine hesitancy, there's a big difference. So there are some group of people who are anti-vaccinators who are totally against the vaccine, the concept of vaccine, or even having that. And there are some group of people who are actually hesitant, which means it's not that they don't want to take it, they're not sure. And my point is, I think those are the group that we can easily target, and we can have our control, not control, but we can achieve vaccinating those people by gaining their trust. I mean, when we did a national statistic, I mean, there's a research or there's a paper for BMJ, which was published literally on 28th of March. That's a really good paper on vaccine hesitancy. It shows actually the data. So 82% of the UK individuals were very likely, when they were asked, they were very likely to take the vaccine. Only the other few weren't, ready. But even in that population, only very few of them were anti-vaccinators, and the majority of them were actually not sure. And in that, I think the majority of them who were not sure was from Black African, of Black Caribbean, and some of them were Pakistani and Bangladeshi minorities, and some of the white Eastern European. Now, when the media use the term BEM, it's I feel to use that acronym to just segregate and put everything under one umbrella is not helping. Because when I think it's been massively used, and it's been detrimental to use that term BEM in. I've just recently watched the news in Sky News. They've said, oh, there's a lot of hesitancy. Yes, we are addressing the problem, and by keeping everything under one umbrella called BEM, but are we actually, doing something to kind of resolve the issue? I think what would be good is to address that particular community. So let's suppose when you say BEM, there's so many people, every community. It's a broad terminology,
Yeah,
you know. Culture can be different. So if we can identify a particular group and what is the cause, and to be honest, from my experience, I have been analyzing this from a long time, and I think communication language, it's becoming a big barrier for them to understand. For example, in the vaccine clinic, I have been so many times I've been asked, oh, does it have any meat product? I'm allergic to penicillin. Can I be fertile enough? Now, all these things are there in probably all news media, but those population do not actually go to see BBC or
Right.
Sky News.
Course,
Their
yeah.
source could be Facebook, could be Instagram. So I think as an individual, as a healthcare professional, if each of us take that extra responsibility to, disseminate that information, be it a local language or going a bit ahead with that, I think that's going to help a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that it's come up because it was one of the questions I was meaning to ask you actually, as to what your take is on the term and the acronym BAME. Me and you, even on back and forth on LinkedIn, we've used it as shorthand and things. It's something that the people are sometimes at pains to make sure that they are appropriately using the progressive language of the time to make sure that we can be appropriately sensitive. And BAME is a phrase that has been proliferated recently, or relatively recently, but also people of colour. But those aren't synonymous because, of course, within a BAME category, as you mentioned, one of the larger minorities of Eastern Europeans that are then vaccine hesitant are being lumped in under BAME because they are minority ethnic. But fundamentally, that therefore is why it's not a synonym for people of colour, which sometimes people make the mistake of doing. So you've spoken a little bit about how you feel that actually on a statistical level it's clumsy. On a personal level, is it something that you feel irritated by? Does it other you as a phrase?
Of course, I do. I won't lie. I get very frustrated when, again, with the news, I'll say very openly in Sky News, they said BEM, which means Indian, Pakistan, where it's not true. Whereas statistically, it's particularly some of the Asian ethnicity like Bangladesh or Pakistani, they need support. The reason it frustrates me is when we don't know the problem correctly, we can't find the right solution. For instance, there has been videos on vaccine in different languages from BBC and in other languages. But what I found is even though there's a huge chunk of population from Bangladesh who are probably not aware, or there's a lot of less vaccination, but there's less resources in Bangla. So when we understand the
Right.
problem rightly, then only we can address it. It's about representing the issue correctly, and not to forget a person. It doesn't help when you say people. If somebody asks me, look, I'm in a childbearing age, can I take the vaccine? And I say, yes, there's no problem. It doesn't work that way. You need to explain a bit. Look, it's an mRNA vaccine or adenovirus vaccine. It's not a live virus. It's not going to interact with your placenta. It does not alter your DNA. So a little bit of explanation can always help in gaining the trust, rather than just saying, it helps.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think what I find interesting about that is that you as a clinician, we can comprehend that the accuracy of a diagnosis is so important to the ongoing management of any case. And in this instance, you're describing the fact that the more accurate we can be over what we're meaning by these things and not use clumsy terminology, then that's only going to mean that we can deal with create the better solutions to these
Yeah.
problems. And I think that's really interesting for me because it makes sense on every level. But I think that one of the reasons that people are maybe lumping in their language is often because they are ill-informed, or they just don't know really where to look, and therefore they just stay away from topics like this because they feel unqualified to discuss them. Whereas fundamentally, as healthcare professionals, especially to support our patients that might have these concerns, we need to make sure we've at least got some understanding of what's happening there. You've mentioned cultural features. It's something that is quite, having that cultural understanding and sensitivity is something that, because of the varied nature of it. So say a Black African patient of Nigerian heritage that's got some concerns that might be tethered to cultural norms is going to be somewhat different to a Black Afro-Caribbean patient. Now, it might be similar, but it's something that could be distinct. And understanding those cultural things, it sometimes can feel quite overwhelming. And one of the reasons why I think sometimes people lump stuff in and sometimes then almost over stereotype by doing so, by doing that generic. Do you think it's something that is quite a tall order that we all need to just step up and understand some of those cultural deviations, or do you think that there are some things that kind of the low-hanging fruit that we can all understand and therefore, better ourselves without it being a massive educational burden on every individual?
In a normal scenario without COVID, I think it's a bit too much to expect, but in this particular scenario, when we are going through a national emergency, it's a crisis. We do not have any other option, no matter how much we do in vaccination, unless and until 70 to 80% of a whole population has been immunized or vaccinized or have had their vaccine. We're not going to achieve herd immunity, and we cannot overcome this problem. So it's about the need. I think it's a need of this hour. We have to understand the culture. We have to understand why there is a hesitancy, and whatever is needed, we should be doing that, because I think it doesn't work whether what I think or what probably is need. It's just the need. We probably sadly we don't have any other option. We have to do this way.
Yeah, whatever happens, we need to improve our education, and even if that means that you've got to do some learning that might be disruptive, it's something that really, as you say, it's more to do with what happens if not. It's the consequences if not loom large over all of us there. Now, if any of you that are listening live, I know most of you listen to this on your commute and things like that, and we get messages on social media and on email after the fact, which is great. Thank you so much for those that do that. But those that are listening live, then please do drop us any questions, and we'll share those with Ashree, because I've got plenty. I've always got lots of questions, but if any of you want to get involved and ask any questions, then please do so on the chat functions and etc. Now, what I wanted to get into really is on some examples then as to what it is that is fueling some of the hesitancy. And we know, as you've already mentioned, it's a case-by-case basis, but what are some of the commonalities? What are the frequent things that you're offering counters to, both in terms of resources as well as in vaccine clinic?
I think with the vaccine clinic, NHS has done a fantastic job. In fact, I have got a sheet here. So this is the kind of sheet. As soon as you arrive to the vaccine clinic, you get this 2-page sheet, and honestly, that has got all information, all the questions that people have been asking. What's the contents of the vaccine, like whether it has got any meat product, whether it has got penicillin, I'm allergic to this, I'm allergic to that, whether can I take it. Everything is there in the sheet, so which is quite helpful when somebody arrives at the vaccine clinic. We would hand this first and then carry on the vaccination. But again, in that, it's in English. So people who've got language, I mean, I had even in my vaccine clinic, I could never do the vaccination the stipulated time. I always take more time because, they come to me with having a brown skin. They tend to ask me a lot of questions. So I think the common thing that I was always asked in the vaccine clinic is whether it's safe, whether it's alters my DNA, and why we take the vaccine, but the virus is mutating. What if the other mutation, the vaccine is not gonna work? Now, it's very important to know, and I have learned this as well. So property of any virus to mutate, and it has done in the past. It's not a new thing that the virus is mutating. We are having so many variants. It has done in the past. In fact, the virus, like let's say H1N1, the flu vaccine, we take it every year because the virus actually mutates 1,000, 2,000 times every year, and that's called antigenic shift. Whereas there are some viruses like measles, it doesn't mutate at all, so we just need one dose. So it's not something that has happened that is new, but we got to understand this is we haven't yet known where does the coronavirus stands, whether it's a virus like measles or it's a virus like H1N1. We don't know because it's somewhere in between. Right. So because it's new, it is getting hard to understand. But as long as we tell people, look, this is not something different. And whenever a vaccine is formed, the scientists or the researchers do have this in their mind that virus can mutate, and we should make the vaccine in such way that it should, because if there is a change in one or two spike protein, it's not going to change the whole virus structure. So the vaccine ideally should work. So these are the thing, I think, major concern about blood clots recently about the AstraZeneca, although there has been so many research who has already suggested that it doesn't actually an impact of the vaccine. So it's just a bit more, I think, effective communication that helps people more.
Yeah, I think and you can only answer authentically if you know you have an answer to that question. It's something that if it floors you, then you need to go and do that learning, do that understanding, grapple with it yourself. I think that one of the things that's been interesting is just the take that it seems that, from what I can gather, you and I have on this is that you kind of be patient, be understanding of the fact that everyone's individual circumstances of how they've come to understand their knowledge, and also their reluctance in sometimes circumstances and hesitancy, is that it's being understanding and being forgiving of the uniqueness of people's circumstances. Whereas there are other pressures whereby it's been ridicule, the fact that people struggle to empathize at all with any sense of hesitancy, regardless of the reasons. As you've mentioned, the reasons are often complex. Do you feel that the corners of society that have been and continue to be quite dismissive of these sorts of things, has that been a particular hindrance to it? Because that, to me, seems that people double down sometimes when those pressures occur.
Of course, yeah, and that's the main worry. I think we are going to end the lockdown. We are going to open everything soon. Although I think probably nearly 50 to 60% of the UK population has been vaccinated. But remember, even if we have 10% of those population who haven't had the vaccine, they can be the main source. It's like a potential reservoir of the virus, and it can just change everything altogether. So it's very important to kind of, yes, address them. And when you try to address them in a good way, because sometimes that can, if you don't do that in a more sensitive way, they can be very dismissive, and they can just, it can be paradoxical, basically.
Sure, yeah, you can close off. I mean, it's understandable, isn't it? If anyone's sort of unfairly ridiculed over something that's a completely reasonable concern, then they're just going to be closed off and then really, really inaccessible. I think one of the things I talked about on yesterday's show is I shared my thoughts and views on some of the sort of downstream policy consequences of vaccine passports and ongoing tracking and things like that, whereby if, say, there are people that are vaccine hesitant and the like who then delay or decide not to have the vaccine, that we can end up with 2, 3, or 4 tier system in which you've got people that can and can't access various services because it's papers please. And I was sort of went at length as to where my issues are with that, and although interested in the fact that a lot of this is a moving picture, so I said I'd reserve full judgment on it until we kind of knew exactly what it was looking like. But I wondered what your thoughts are, having interacted in this space for quite a while. Is that something that you are concerned about, or is it something that you would welcome? Is actually there being somewhat social sanctions on people that do decide against it?
I'm not very sure about the vaccine passport, but having making the vaccine as a mandatory thing, I'm very much in support of it as an NHS, as a healthcare professional. As mentioned before, it's just not fair for the 80% or 82% of the population who have had the vaccine versus the population who have not had, because they can potentially be super. So if you're in lockdown, that's fine. When everything opens up and people mingle with each other, so if somebody who hasn't had the vaccine, they can then can be a super spreader. So yes, making the vaccine as a mandatory thing, I'm very much in support of that, obviously provided they don't have any medical illness that prevents or contract have it. Regarding the vaccine passport, it's a broader terminology. It all depends how efficiently it can be implemented. Now, having that in place, but if the implementation is not efficient, if it's not used properly, then it's going to be a massive failure. So yeah, it all depends about the logistic and how efficiently that can be actually implemented. New York has, I think, started their vaccine passport. So it's probably pilot. We're going to see how well it's going to work.
And some, New York and Israel, I understand, are ahead on some of that infrastructure. Are you thinking then, when you mention mandatory vaccination, are you meaning for healthcare staff, or are you meaning generally?
In general, and good you mentioned about healthcare staff, and this is one of the things I've mentioned in my BBC interview as well. The concerning thing is a lot of healthcare workers are hesitant as well. They are not taking, and I think they are the main threat than even general public, because I mean, again, a genuine concern is understandable, but have your own research. I mean, research on something before you make your judgment, or because a healthcare professional is one who people believe, or people trust. So yes, a mandatory for them, for population, yes, but again, just understanding what is it that is stopping them to have the vaccine. So first, having that kind of chat, making like social work. I think in East London, they have got a program or service where they go door to door and kind of explain. They've got representative from that community. So yeah, all these things we should be doing before making it as a mandate. But if nothing is working at one point, then we kind of having to go in that direction.
Right. I mean, I admittedly, I get really squeamish when it comes to thinking about what that would look like. If people are unpersuadable, then are we literally injecting people under duress? That I kind of get really nervous about, hoping we never end up in that situation, and certainly found myself finding it difficult to support that in principle. Although in practice, you've made the cases to understanding that if we are trying to aspire to a herd immunity, then especially if there are pockets of communities of which they then, it's not as if those that are unvaccinated are spread widely across the nation. If they're in pockets, then it does leave us vulnerable on that theory. We've had a question come in, because I've been hugging you a little bit here. We've had a question come in from Sam who asks, because you had COVID, were there ever did you then go on to be vaccinated, or did you use the immunity that you'd got from having had the virus?
Yeah, so I had I was tested positive on 23rd of December. So I was in isolation for 14 days. Then I was symptom free after 10 days. So I could get back to work after my isolation period. However, just to be on a safer side, I did my test again, and my test was negative at the end of 14 days. And then I returned to vaccine. I did not have the vaccine. I had to wait for 4 weeks, because that's one of the criteria. If you had COVID in the last 4 weeks, you cannot take the vaccine. You have to wait for 4 weeks and then take the vaccine. And that's what I did.
Right. And was there ever a point in which you yourself had any hesitancy over the fact that you're likely to have the antibodies from having had COVID? Because that's one of the things that people are concerned about. It's like, why am I having to do both?
I had, I wouldn't lie, I did have a concern when there was a lot of thing going around infertility, Pfizer, especially with Pfizer, you can, but then I researched myself, I understood the kind of physiology, and I've kind of understood, yes, there is an interaction of the mRNA in the placenta, but there is no research, and there is an mRNA, the life scale of mRNA is quite less. It just kind of, it's like common cold viruses, destroys. So there is no way, it could. So yeah, I think it's kind of doing your own research, making an informed decision about any of the concern.
Because I think that's one of the interesting challenges, and we've got a point here from what's this? So it's just flashed up. A comment from Scott, who says the fact that it's more challenging for non-healthcare professionals. I think that's one of the things that's interesting, isn't it? Because what you've referred to there, and obviously I've done some of that myself, not just for needing to commentate on these issues, but also for personal and families asking after stuff, is that you know where to read, don't you? You know where to look. We've just mentioned and posted the BMJ article recently. For those that aren't necessarily medically trained or au fait with scientific method in any which way, it can be quite daunting. So it's resources such as the ones that you've created that help to translate that material a little better.
Yeah, and that's the reason why I thought, in fact, I'm in a process of joining a group called HALO. You must have heard. HALO is, they've got collaboration with the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, and they're a group of clinicians who are working particularly in the vaccine hesitancy. So as I mentioned before, those individuals, they probably who are hesitant, they may not rely on sources like BBC, Sky News, or BMJ. They look at Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. So this is where we are targeting, and that is where our role come into picture. I know it takes extra time, extra energy, but if you 2 minutes of video on Facebook or Instagram representing yourself as a healthcare and disseminating that information massively helps the general public.
No, that makes sense. We've had a comment through on YouTube now. Unfortunately, on YouTube, you don't get individual people. You just get like code names and stuff like that. So Thriller72 has asked, so if you take it, or regardless of your concerns, you'd be forced. I think that's one of the things that people find interesting, isn't it, about this, is that with what you're describing, if we hope that when they get anywhere near this, but is the word force is where people get twitchy. How would you feel about that if people were being forced under a needle against their wish?
They should not be forced. Anyone, be anyone or any medication, any vaccine, nobody should forced to take it. I think there should be enough provision or facility to educate them, to provide them the right information, which will force them to take it. But enforcing something, it's never going to work. I don't think it's right from the humanitarian point of view.
Yeah, I think I've just noticed the time. We best wrap up, haven't we? I won't keep you any
Sorry,
longer,
yeah.
certainly, as long as this hasn't been too traumatic and you're willing to come back, I'd love to get stuck into some FCP stuff with you in the future. You know, there's lots more that we could discuss beyond what we're talking about today. But obviously, we're trying to take the most prescient and most important things first, and this is certainly a very much a hot topic, which is what we try to visit on this show. So thank you so much as ever for your time. Could you just let people know a little bit about where they can find more about you and how to access the resources you've talked about?
Sure. So I'm in LinkedIn in name Ashree Singh, and there's lots of videos in different languages, Urdu, Hindi, and South Asian languages I've done. So you could either check my Facebook page called Vaccine Against Infodemics, or in YouTube, YouTube again, Ashree Singh. There's few in LinkedIn in my profile. So if you subscribe that, you'll get all the videos that I've been doing on breathing exercises, long COVID, vaccine hesitancy, and so many other things.
Fantastic. I've just realized that we didn't have our names up. So for those that are listening rather than watching, that's ASHREESINGH. Ashree Singh is producing these resources for us to then share. Get in touch with us if you're struggling to find them, and we'll make sure we link to them appropriately. But thank you so much, Ashree, for all you're doing and for coming on the show to talk about this important topic today. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you so much. Just to add one more thing, my full name is Bhagyashree. So if you have problem with Ashree, just put Bhagyashree, BHAGYASHREE. Thank you.
Brilliant, lovely. Well, we'll make sure we link to that as well. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Really appreciate it as well this week. But as I mentioned, it's bank holiday, so even I'm going to have some time off, or at least a few hours. I might have a few minutes and a couple of lunch times off. So I'll be back on the Wednesday. We do have a show on the Tuesday, but it's our guest host. So if you haven't tuned in yet, then please do tune in to our guest hosts on Tuesdays, because they've been some brilliant shows. I think the first one of the month is with the Physio Matters First Steps team, talking with their first guest on all things sort of students and new graduates, and how in this mad, brave new world that we're facing, how they can overcome and how you can best support students in this way. So thanks as ever, and we'll see you soon and see you next week. All the best.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you. Bye.